writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. In this episode of Write Pack Radio, we are going to celebrate an author's birthday and talk about writing epics. Stay tuned.
Epic.
This is David Allen Lucas, author of Crazy Things, president of St. Louis Writers Guild, president of Winding Trails Media, and voice actor / audiobook narrator. And with me today is not my lovely co-host, she's called in sick, so with me is my lovely wife.
I'm Melanie Lucas. I have done no writing for myself this week, but at some point I will be writing a fantasy novel.
Now, you've been working my old work schedule when I used to work for a business. You've been going 7 in the morning till about 9 at night, so...
Yeah, but that counted commuting.
Yes.
It wasn't always.
Can you ride on the train?
No.
No, not really.
And also with us is our mistress of the beautiful arts, arts and illustration.
I like watching my title manifest in your brain before you say it.
Thank you. I know, I enjoy it. Go ahead.
My name is Jennifer Sulzer. I'm a children's book author illustrator. It is the month of April, which means that my author illustrating talents will be on display at the end of the month on the 28th at Main Street Books in St. Charles if you live in St. Louis. My author friend Jessica Matthews is launching her next picture book, which I illustrated, and I will be launching a children's book alongside her. I wish I could tell you which one. Depends on which one I finish first. Because this is the past. And by April 1st, I hope it's done. Because otherwise I have problems. Stay tuned, I suppose, to see if you end up seeing my book get launched. You'll see my pictures regardless, so check that out.
For any new followers that are listening, we do tend to record in the past and for the future. Today actually is March the 3rd, 4th.
It's March the 4th.
But for you guys, today is April 1st. And this is not an April Fool's joke. Also with us
it can't
is
be because it's March the 4th.
Yeah, is the Madame of Murder herself.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And coming sometime or other from 5 Star Cengage is Have Your Ticket Punched by Frank James. I'm also president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime, and it's wearing that hat that I will make my next appearance. It is going to be on April 11th at Left Bank Books in the Central West End in St. Louis on Euclid Avenue. And I will be interviewing another sister in crime, Jill Orr, who's from Columbia, Missouri, and she writes humorous mysteries that are just a delight to read. Her new book is called Bad Break, excuse me.
Bad Break.
The other thing was
Breaking Bad was a TV show.
Right, that's a different thing. And this is Bad Break, okay? And it's going to be great fun, I promise you. So come out on the 11th of April, 7 o'clock, Left Bank Books.
Excellent. And also coming to us live online is the one and only epic writer himself.
Oh, I guess I'm Ryan Freeman. Ryan P. Freeman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a part of the branding thing. No. I'm Ryan P. Freeman. I am, I guess, an epic fantasy writer. I have Rain Spell out if you're looking for something to, hold your door open or maybe read. You know what? If people can write stuff like Dune, then I can write big old thick doorstop fantasy stories. So, anyways, I have the Great Isle Tale, also available illustrated edition. Also, hopefully by this time, we'll also have the wonderfully illustrated by our own Jennifer Stolzer, Trombone Stuffed Bunce short story, now in illustrated edition, and as an adult coloring book.
Yes.
So yeah, you can color along with the adventure, which I thought was exciting. And I am also the founder of the Hannibal Writers Guild. You can find out more at ryanpfreeman.com.
Excellent. And today we're going to talk about a author whose birthday we want to celebrate. She was born in April, I believe. Nope, you're the one with the author information.
No, that's always Brandon. He's not,
He's not
absent.
here. He's absent, so...
But you have a phone.
I was going to deliver us the definition.
No, you deliver a definition of it. I've got
How about you, Melanie?
Edna
You have a
Farber.
phone.
Edna Ferber?
Edna Ferber, yes.
Thank you. Was born... I'm sorry, this is her death celebration, not her
It's
birthday.
her wake. Yes.
It's her wake.
Oh, wait.
She was born August 15th, 1885. Died April 16th, 1968. She was an American novelist, short story writer, and playwright. She won Pulitzer Prize, the Pulitzer Prize for So Big, Showboat, which got made into a musical in 1927, and looks like Cimarron. Sorry, I'm reading from a distance here, people, and my apologies. She also wrote Giant, which was made into a Hollywood movie in 1956, and Ice Palace, which was filmed in 1960. She wrote the book, got made into the movie. And she's known
And
for...
in all fairness, so were all of those others.
Yeah.
Every single
One
one
of
was
them
a
was
film.
an Academy Award
Yes,
winner.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Which one was that? You got that?
You have to scroll back up.
Da-da-da-da, there you go.
That was Cimarron, I
It
think.
was Cimarron.
Yeah.
Cimarron was made into won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1931.
Right. So, and then today we're also going to talk about epics, so...
Well, you know that Edna
Let's talk about
Ferber
her.
was an epic writer. Every single one of those books is an epic. I mean, she wrote some other things too. In her earlier career, she wrote romance. She was also a journalist, and she wrote some wonderful, funny plays with George Kaufman, like Dinner at 8, which is very funny, and it too was made into a movie, which is quite a funny movie, but an old one. If you ever get a chance to see it, I say do. It was entertaining, even though it was created in the 40s, I think. So she was quite a well-rounded author, but her most famous works were all of them epics. And so that brings us to Jennifer's big moment, as she's going to tell us what an epic is.
Well, an epic is, there are many definitions for epic. The first one provided by Wiktionary.com is an extended narrative poem. You think of the epic poems, Homer and all that. So an extended narrative poem, an elevated, dignified language celebrating the feats of a deity or demigod or other legendary traditional hero. So telling heroic stories was the historic definition of an epic.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we've lived many, many years since the times of telling stories of Orpheus. So the definition of epic has changed to being like those, not necessarily having to be about the stories of a hero, but extending beyond the usual or ordinary, extraordinary, monumentous, great, which then translates us into the casual, man, epic party last night. Woo!
No, I don't think it translates there at all, actually, no.
I think slang-wise it does. Like, yeah.
Nowadays, an epic story does not have to be a poem. An epic story can be any work that exceeds 120,000, 140,000 words. So that's what the publishing industry considers an epic.
120 to 140,000 words. That's a lot of words.
So that means there's a lot of material, and it typically is going to cover then more than one generation, perhaps an entire span of time of a century or more. So it is
I
big.
don't know.
Epics are big.
They're big,
Well,
but
epics are big, yes. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings is certainly an epic, but that
Uh-huh.
doesn't cover a huge amount of time.
But it represents an awful lot of history. Like while the story
It compresses
itself.
time, doesn't it? I mean, it really does cover a lot of time. It just compresses it.
No. You're lumping in some of his other works with the Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings takes place within one journey.
Right.
So it's the time it takes Frodo to walk from the Shire to Rivendell to Mordor back. But
Like a year, maybe two.
I do not know how it breaks down. But the the lore and the world of the Lord of the Rings, in which Tolkien wrote many books, dates all the way back to the beginning of his universe. Like, he has a creation myth involved, and those things feed into the Lord of the Rings, and that gives it its epic quality. That when you're reading about these people, they're referring back to the heroes of the old times and the gods of their world, and people we don't run into in the Lord of the Rings, but they still exist within the world of the Lord of the Rings.
So I would call that an epic series, not a standalone or single epic. What do you
That's a
think?
good question. Ryan, I'm going to let you jump in because you've been waiting, and then I'm going to give my opinion for what it's worth. Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, great. Well, first off, I think when defining an epic, personally, I lean towards the classical definition, just because when I'm writing epics, that's where I get a lot of my inspiration and source material. I think it has something to do with the tone that the author takes up. And even though it might be a long fantasy book, I don't think long fantasy books necessarily mean that they're epics. I think it has something to do with the writer's style and their voice. But that's just my personal opinion. But that's what I've seen kind of pop up. It's something that, like, Lord of the Rings captures. I think it's something that even maybe the Chronicles of Narnia captures, because even though it's short, it has the same sort of voice to it. A lot of other shorter fantasy works, I feel, also match that same voice, even though they can't actually hold your door open during a windstorm. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. It is a style of storytelling where you're bringing in so much information into the story itself. Be it a book, be it a series of books, be it a movie, whatever media in which you're telling the story. An epic can take place over a relatively short time. And let me use Melanie's example, Lord of the Rings. 3 books, written as 1 book, by the way, FYI. But 3 books, it's an epic series, takes place for however long, as Jen says. I'm not even sure how long.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
There's a lot of traveling.
There's a lot of
any
traveling
amount of time.
And a lot of purple prose in there. I'm sorry, I love Tolkien, but yeah. Let me use another one, completely different series, and that is Shogun. All of James Clavell. I don't know if most people know, all of James Clavell's books make up one gigantic epic series across the entire time period, from basically Shogun up to modern day. Shogun takes place, for those who don't know, during the beginning, actually the creation of a Tokugawa shogunate in Japan. Actually, the books are written out of order. First book that is in that saga, in that series, is King Rat, which is about an American I'm not sure about the American part, but it's about a POW in Japan during World War II. You have the Sackets by Louis L'Amour. That entire is a family-based saga across the way. So I don't think there's any set thing that says it has to be over a certain time. I think it's a question of how the voice is handled, how the universe is handled, and how other characters, the side characters, can become more important than they are in just a simple book. Go ahead.
Well, all this speculation is feeding into that first definition of epic, which is being. Let me pull the exact wording up. An extended narrative poem, not necessarily a poem, an elevated or dignified language celebrating the feats of a hero. The elevated and dignified language is what Ryan mentioned as being something that has an epic tone to it. It's speaking in grand terms and embracing a broader sense of the world, which is sort of what you're bringing up with Shogun, that it's talking about sweeping changing things, and the reign of a shogunate and all that. That's those play into that original definition. That is what kind of gave us the word, of epic poem, from back when we were talking about Hercules and writing poems about the
Gilgamesh
gods
and so forth.
I think that's an important point, that epics have a scope,
Right.
which is they're biting. I mean, the authors are biting off a really big chunk of something. Edna Ferber, for example, in, say, Showboat, which is one of her most famous. It became Broadway musical, movie, everything. It tries to encapsulate life on the river before the Civil War in its good parts, its bad parts, and while there is no totally great hero in it, it goes beyond simply the issue of heroism to encapsulate something of importance, an era of importance. In Giant, another one of hers, here she tackles the growth of the petroleum industry. Texas Oil grows up and almost dies in her years that the big ranch is there. So each of hers for sure, tries to tell a story which encapsulates an era of modern America. In Ice Palace, it's Africa. That's modern America for sure. It's Alaska.
Yes.
And the growth of Alaska from territory through its wild times to becoming a state.
Excellent. Ryan and then Melanie.
I'm really glad earlier you mentioned the word saga, and I think that's an important distinction when we're talking about epics because sagas I found they're a little more, relatively speaking, closer in time frame to modern times. A good example is the saga of Icelanders, which follows the first families that helped settle Iceland up into kind of like the first kind of Viking explorations in North America and the early medieval Iceland. I don't think that would be technically considered an epic, even though it is long, even though it is thick, even though it follows stories, because the tone is different. Also, they're mostly not dealing with big, huge cosmic events with gods, with like creation of the world sort of stuff. It's a little bit different. Because I primarily write and read epics. I really feel like epics on a literary scale do a really good job at dating literature and almost the world too. It's almost a way to date time by the style of writing used and what they're talking about. The really early epics tend to deal with gods, with creation, with the choices that those families of gods make and the fallout. And then as you follow it through the ages, not just the years, but the ages, you see how those affect the created beings in it, like people. You start kind of drifting away from the god stories to maybe the half gods, like the demigods, and then you kind of get into like maybe there's not so much of the demigods, but there's these really cool enchanted items, and they change history. And then you start going into like, well, we kind of remember those things, but nobody really has any anymore. We remember it. And then you slowly kind of wade into this modern era of writing. And as you do, the stories and how you tell them change. I find it all really fascinating.
Melanie, and then I might be turning things on my head, so I'm going to let Jen and Fedora go next after that. Melanie?
Yeah, I was just wondering, we were talking a bit about scope, and I'm trying to remember back to, high school at least, when I read a translation of Beowulf, which I believe is epic poetry.
It is an epic poem.
Mm-hmm.
And in my memory, it was an epic quest to kill a Grendel, a dragon, I believe. But it wasn't a...
Dragon.
Yeah.
That happens later.
Okay. But point is, I thought it was just one. I didn't think it spanned a great deal of time.
It's the epic poem that tells the tales of the hero Beowulf. That's what makes it an epic poem, is that we're singing the praises and the downfalls of this great man. And he's going on, he's fighting trolls, he's fighting dragons, he's becoming king, he's falling
and
in
literally
grace.
singing, because originally it was supposed
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So it's that's what makes it an epic poem, not so much the time it takes within its telling, but the glorifying of its character. which shows all the different definitions of,
Yep.
of epic.
Jen, and then Fedora, and then I'm going to do a twist.
I was going to bring up, I looked up another definition of epic as a literary genre, and just wanted to give a couple, just for perspective, what the literature world considers epics. Of course, there's the Odyssey and the Iliad, and those sort of things, but they also include War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. That's considered an epic novel.
Yep, it is.
And that's a very long novel, but also like Fedora brought up, it's one that's taking a period of time more than a specific character and telling the heroic tales of that, like putting that on the pedestal instead of a specific character like the Odyssey did. Also, Ivan the Terrible by Sergei Einstein is considered an epic because that's taking a character and making him into a hero, but not necessarily in the same way that War and Peace does. So
Right.
it's that sort of tone set. Different. I just wanted to bring up a couple examples that weren't necessarily ancient Greek epics.
Yeah.
Winds of War and War and Remembrance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Zhivago was another Russian
Uh-huh.
one.
Yes.
Melanie, you've been around me too much. You just mentioned two of my favorites. Thank you. Go ahead.
Now,
I think we need to spend a moment talking about what epics are not, because it is certainly possible for an author to do a huge series of things like Janet Ivanovich with her humorous novels and not have an epic at all.
Yeah.
And I would include in that category also a person who did do a lot of historical stuff, spanning many generations, and that would be William Faulkner, a wonderful, wonderful author. But as far as I'm concerned, and I've read maybe a dozen of his 20 or so Yoknapatawpha County books, I can't see any real threads that run through them consistently that give me an epic kind of picture. And so I believe that it's possible to have a whole lot of books on one subject and still not have an epic, because it needs to have threads of continuity that run through it and eventually create a feeling of an entire era.
You just kind of just stole my thunder, so thank you.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was going to go. What doesn't make an epic, or what can go into an epic? Let's put it that way.
I was
Tell me
thinking
one
about
question.
this topic as well. I'm glad we're moving on to it. I think it would be very difficult to write a middle grade epic. I could be it would be less difficult, but still very difficult to write a YA epic.
Well,
Because-
count?
What?
Aragon count?
What?
Would Aragon count?
Oh, no. No,
I
it
also
was.
asked about Harry Potter, but go ahead.
It's because we're talking about epic as being a tone.
Right.
And writing YA and writing middle grade is by nature of the genre, you have to keep it very insular to a character and the emotional story that they are going through. So Harry Potter, while a saga, a great series, I would not call it an epic because it is written in a very casual, present tense tone. So that's why I think it would be difficult to write a YA epic, because the epic is by nature sweeping and broad and is more suited to adult fiction that is worried more about plot than character in a lot of cases.
Edna Ferber explained why she wrote epics in this. This is a quote from her. "There are 3 ways in which a man expresses his deep sorrow. The man on the lowest level cries. The man on the second level is silent. But the man on the highest level knows how to turn his sorrow into song." And that's what she used as her mantra and lived by it in the things that she wrote.
Nice mantra.
Turn sorrow into song. That's what an epic does.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to jump for rails here, but I can't help but think of a certain favorite Babylon 5 character right there.
Well,
Yeah. Anyway, so
I can think of probably 3 that fit that, actually.
no, I'm just thinking of a certain person who had song in his password. Anyway, I'm completely off the topic there. Sorry. Back to talking about epics.
Well, I brought up that it would be difficult. I was hoping we'd have some argument about that. But there's another subcategory of epic, which is called the beast epic, which fits fables. Those aren't necessarily long, but these are stories in which you're writing about animals, and the animals are the proxies of humans that are teaching us some lesson.
Still, I wouldn't call Animal Farm a saga, much less an epic.
I don't know if I would put Animal Farm in there.
Well, it's about
Yeah.
using animals as people.
It is. It's a good example of that in practice. But the beast epic, and I'm scrolling through my phone to find.
Well, Beowulf is that.
Yes, they're narrative poems that date from the Middle Ages, is what the beast epics were.
Ah, okay.
So the fables,
Like the Three Little Pigs.
is
I'm just
so-
throwing,
no,
I'm throwing out
that's-
something from that time period. Or,
they
Feel like
mention
from
Reynard the Fox as an example of a character.
yes, okay.
Chanticleer the Cock. Those characters that are used. Yeah, they also list Animal Farm further down as I scroll through, as a modern adaptation of the Beast Tale that
The
we're
Beast
using.
Tale, yes, I go with.
Yes.
I don't think that makes
So,
it
but
an epic.
I don't think it's an epic either. But it's calling back to the beast epics of the Middle Ages, where they were trying to do the same sort of thing that ancient Greeks did with their heroic songs and their epic poetry, to teach their modern era of people's stories using, instead of heroes and gods, animal proxies and stand-ins for situations in which you're learning something. And that's how they've defined epic in that case, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Question for you. I'm going to change the direction a little bit. In our modern world today, where people want to be entertained, pretty much like flipping on a light switch, on, off. They want it short. They want to get on, get out, be done, move on. How is it the epics have remained so popular and still drive the entertainment, drive a reader?
Well, I think in one sense, modern entertainment actually lends itself to epic better than the old, because we can do something called binge watch.
Yes, thank you, Netflix and Hulu and everybody else. Yes.
Yeah, so people can go back and catch up and spend a day watching 5 hours of, or 10 hours of a series, whatever. So, the Game of Thrones. So that's I guess that would be a modern epic.
I would consider it epic.
Yeah, I haven't actually read the books or seen the series, so I don't know, but...
It matches the definition we've been working with from the internet so far.
Cool.
Yeah. So, point is, in the past, it just struck me that a generation ago, soap operas had a lot less plot to them.
Mm-hmm.
And now, soap operas, believe it or not, go faster than they did in a generation ago. I know this is hard to believe to modern audiences, but it's true. And that's because anyone that cares can go back and rewatch them, so they don't have to worry about people missing an episode and needing to be caught up.
Mm-hmm. I think the modern soap opera is a really great example of trying to pull sort of a modern version of an epic.
Or at least a saga.
A dumbed down
It's
version.
not. It lacks that elevated language that was mentioned in the definition, but it certainly is trying to capture the feeling of a whole family or extended politics and international travel, and like they're.
Oh, and you ask if young adult could be an epic?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, some young adult gets very soap opera-y, so,
Yeah, I suppose.
Yep. So Fedora and then Ryan?
Well, I think that many different artists from different countries attempt to write epics in one fashion or another. And often those will get very important coverage elsewhere. Take, for example, Clay McCullough's The Thornbirds, which is an Australian epic.
Mm-hmm.
Some authors, like James Joyce, deliberately set out to imitate Ulysses and create an epic for his home country of Ireland. And you can find that, I think, in all countries. In France, Marcel Proust, Remembrance of Things Past. And, of course, we have a wonderful example in Roots.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has been made into 2 miniseries. And not so very long. And I can't think the guy's name right at the moment, but he deserves a mention here.
We did an episode for him before.
That's
Alex
right.
Haley or LeVar?
Alex Haley.
Alex
There we
Haley.
go.
Thank you. Good
Alex
job.
That's getting ready to say it. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah. Ryan, and then I'm thinking we'll come back with a statement there. Ryan?
Okay, I'm really glad you brought up that question about, why are we still telling epics. This is one of the reasons that kind of got me to write Brainsville in the first place, and also I ended up writing a paper about it back in college. J.R.R. Tolkien, one of the essays he wrote was on fairy stories. If you have a chance, go find it either in a book, or you can find it on the internet too. But I felt like it was really groundbreaking because in it, one of the things he talks about is that there are these bones of story, there are these flavors of story, this big stew, and over the years, each writer kind of has their turn cooking the stew, and so you still come across these old bits of story that still get talked about today. You still get bits of Arthur, you still get bits of dragons and knights and gods and these big sweeping epics, and each generation of writers gets their own little chance to add to the soup. And the bits that stick with us, he argues, are the bits of what we're actually getting at here is truth. Those things that are common to humanity at any point in history. And it's one of kind of the high callings of a writer, is to be able to ladle out some of this for his generation. Whether it's long or you have the voice or you don't, we're all kind of taking turns around this big soup kettle, which is writing, and we all get a chance to kind of put out our own story, our own twist, and what lasts, what's remembered, and what's retold. In his mind, his theory are the ones that are successful.
Well, you said basically a version of what I was about to say, but a lot more colorfully, so I won't mention it. Excellent done. Fedora.
Back to Edna Ferber, I think she has some wonderful advice for writers, and you might want to talk about a few of her great quotes and sayings. She says, for example, only amateurs say that they write for their own amusement. Writing is not an amusing occupation. It is a combination of ditch digging, mountain climbing, treadmill, and childbirth. Writing may be interesting, absorbing, exhilarating, racking, relieving, but amusing? Never.
I would go with that. Have never done childbirth before, but yes, the pain I can imagine, and yes, the pain. What I believe it was Hemingway, as I've quoted before, who has always said, "Writing's easy. Just slit your wrist and let the blood go onto the typewriter," or something close to that.
Actually, I find myself amusing myself.
It helps
Yeah,
to
I
have
do.
amusing moments, but so what do you think about writing and writing epics? Ryan, you write epics,
I do.
and I'm going to say, Jen, whether or not you want to admit to it or not, Threadcaster was an epic.
I don't know if it's an epic. It
He
We
came
had a debate
close.
about this one time we were selling
Darn
books,
close.
about who had the longer book.
Yeah.
How many words is your book, Ryan?
It's a little over 300,000.
See, he wins because mine is about 120. So
Yours was thicker.
mine's thicker because the font is bigger and it's spaced out wider. But
Okay,
I
as we
don't
get
know.
to
After a while,
book
it's really
measurements,
hard to find something.
I don't know if I would classify Threadcaster as an epic. I would like for it to, as a series, to start to gain the foothold of an epic. It by itself and the amount of Threadcaster that exists in the world that people can find on Amazon right now, I feel like it's doing that thing where it's hard to write an epic for a YA. Like, I'm trying to keep the scope
Sure.
specifically on Cat, specifically on the villain characters that we follow. And there is past and future, but it's all how does that past and future relate to her? not so much how does she relate to the timeline.
Right.
When I write, sequels into the future, I'll run out of her at some point, and then maybe it'll start feeling more epic because I'll write the story of a new hero who is taking on an adventure inspired by previous heroes, or is going to finish a work that she didn't finish, or evolve the society in a way that either defies her or honors her or something like that. Perhaps it'll get more epic then, but I'm hesitant to call it an epic now, even though it is awful long and very heavy.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to go with my question. And this is really aimed at Ryan, says he definitely does write epics. And I'm still aiming it at you, Jen. I'm sorry.
Okay, you can.
And that is, when there are novels out there that are 50,000 words, 60,000 words, or as we get into sci-fi and fantasy, 80,000 words to 90,000. What keeps you going with writing such a larger story? See how I'm avoiding the word epic on your part here, Jen? Because I quietly call that out. What keeps you going? What makes you want to write something that length, hoping to finding an audience that's willing to read it?
Ryan, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I simply, that's what I do. Whenever I sit down, it ends up being an epic. I don't mean to, but that's just what happens. It's hard for me to write.
The accidental
Epic! Yay!
I meant it. I was taught in college, it's not about word count, it's about writing till it's finished. And I feel like a lot of my stories, I'm still exploring them. I had fun in college, the world building. And then I realized that's at one point that, this thing actually needs stories. I need to actually pick a spot on a map and start writing time. And I realized that these are all woven together. And I simply can't cram everything that I want to really be about, all the things I want to tell and illuminate and show in one book, even if it's a long book. Everything's connected. And I enjoy weaving in long arcs. I enjoy dropping in hints that you won't get unless you read some random little book that I published part of it. I enjoy that, and I know other people do too. I'm exploring with my characters as I write for the most part. I have some vague ideas of where I'm going, but I want to know what happens. Also, the last thing I want to throw in there is I'm writing. One of the reasons is because I'm exploring real world questions. I have real questions about life, about religion, about mythology, about people, the world, politics, all of it. I have real questions, and I feel like writing is my mode to be able to ask the questions and explore. Basically, no holds barred. Maybe what it means and where I am as an individual in it.
Okay.
That's why I write that genre.
I think Melanie has a question or a dovetail, and then over to Jen.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is slightly different or dovetail or not, but I was just, my very slowly coming fantasy is not an epic, but the reason why it's not an epic is because I keep cutting back on the time period I'm going to avoid writing an epic because I'm having enough trouble getting done one thing. But I have enough material to write an epic world easily. And I've just got, but, I cut back my original idea for the story would last about 9 months, and I realized, okay, the first 2 weeks of that would be a whole novel length, so let's just write the first 2 weeks of that, change this, and actually put in a full story plot. Didn't actually take much change to turn that into a complete story, and it's like, okay, fine, now I have a plot that's not an epic plot, but yeah, I already have an epic universe to put things in. But I think some people just think in epic terms, whether or not they're capable of writing the full epic.
I can go with that. I think in novel terms, I can't do a short. Well, I can write a short story, but it's like
putting me in a dentist chair and trying to take out my teeth without Novocaine. Go ahead. Jen.
Well, I suppose that sort of feeds into my answer to your question on why I've written a very long novel, if not an epic novel. It has a lot to do with me not being able to think in short story terms. I've been writing many short stories, but they're very difficult for me to take really what's the difficult part, and the reason why I write long stories. If anyone has read any of my fan fiction, they know that I don't know how to write a short fanfic either. It's been years. It's because all the points I want to hit and the emotional moments require build-up. So it's hard for me to come up with a conflict that I can set up, pay off, and then denouement within 6,000 words and feel like I've done it well.
Yeah.
I really enjoy having a chapter where, a travel chapter where we sit and the characters talk to each other. I like knowing that we've been on this journey for so long that we're just completely exhausted and having the characters respond to that. I enjoy living with one assumption for 100 pages and then throwing a wrench in and having the audience go, wait a second, it's all different now. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do that in a short scope. So writing Threadcaster, I knew I was going to have this sort of, this many pages of us assuming this, and then this many pages of us assuming something else, and both of those different mindsets required setup, red herring, payoff, and then transition. So that's why my books tend to get long, and why my fanfics tend to get long, because I'm trying to get these characters to hug, and sometimes it takes a long time.
Fedora.
I think Enda Ferber's example gives writers something important to work toward in that and some way to improve oneself in a very serious way. She was a member of the Algonquin Roundtable. This was a group of writers in New York: Moss Hart, George Kaufman, Dorothy Parker, Alexander Wolcott, a lot of very famous writers, and many others that just turned up from time to time. And she called them the Poison Squad. And that was a pretty good name because they were absolutely vicious with each other. But also they were very supportive of each other. If you wrote something that was inferior, they would rip it to pieces and tell you all about it. Whether it was a review of a play. Dorothy Parker wrote reviews of plays, and a friend of hers was Katharine Hepburn. But this is what she said about Katharine's performance. She said Katharine gave us the gamut of emotions from A to B.
Ooh.
Ooh, exactly. And I'm sure Katharine didn't like it, but I bet she was better next day. So, by that example of being willing to put yourself out there, and yes, they're your children, and yes, you hate to have anybody call them ugly, but you're never going to make them any prettier if you don't get some feedback. So get to those critique groups and get a thick skin.
Sounds like a plan. And with that, I know we're a little early, but I don't have can't think of a better ending than what you just said.
Well, I've got some other quotes for
Well, in
you.
that case, keep going.
Yes, feed some quotes.
Feed quotes us.
Life can never really defeat a writer who is in love with writing. For life itself is a writer's lover until death. Fascinating, cruel, lavish, warm, cold, treacherous, but constant.
And here I just thought that was a neurosis on my part.
No, it's true. Because like the other people in your life, and writing becomes a people, I think, even though that's terribly ungrammatical. But it's true. It's sometimes you hate it, sometimes you love it, but it's always there. You can't really get around it.
Well,
Jen and then Ryan. Go ahead, Jen.
That quote is evidence of her and her epic writing, is that she lived her life as an epic. And she sought out deep truths and made song out of her sadness and tried to almost be heroic in her own way. And she saw writing as her means of singing that song.
Ryan.
Well, and I like to put it one step further, and I basically say it's because all life is an epic. That my essay goes into. Maybe I'll publish it one of these days. I don't know.
Yeah, do it. Put it out as a little booklet.
Yeah, but that, and it springboards off of Tolkien's ideas, along with an excellent book called From Homer to Harry Potter by Matthew Dickerson, and I highly recommend. It's From Homer to Harry Potter, Handbook on Myth and Fantasy, and the idea is okay. So even though I write, magic and fantasy and whatever, one of my other hats I wear, I'm a pastor. In the Bible, God creates the world using words. So the idea I thought of one day was, well, doesn't that mean we're in a story?
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was fascinating. And so, like, if you figure out, which character you're supposed to be, then you know maybe a little bit about yourself, like what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to treat people.
What if I find out I'm the comic relief?
Well, then own it. Then own it, because we need comic relief. Like not everybody can do that. Marvel movies like Guardians of the Galaxy wouldn't exist if there wasn't like comic reliefs left, right, and center. We need a whole tableau of characters to make a good story work. And figuring out which one you are, you know how to act your part. I don't know. I could go on and on and on. I have a whole paper on it, but
Be looking for that paper he's going to publish on it.
Well, that sounds like scribe material here.
Yeah. Fedora.
yeah.
Another quote. A writer's working hours are his waking hours. He is working as long as he is conscious and frequently when he isn't.
Yeah, that's true. I can't tell you how many times certain things have come in dreams, especially breaking writer's block at times.
I think it's especially important for me because if I think about a problem that I'm having with a scene, and if I think about it right before I go to sleep, in the morning, I have a solution. My subconscious went to work for me while I was asleep.
Yeah.
And that is very handy.
If only we could teach it to type.
So,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If you could harness those notions and with brain power, maybe
Mental
artificial
typewriter.
intelligence will do that one of these days.
personally, I'm scared of that concept. I know how some of my dreams are, and yeah.
That would be the only case in which I'd let them put a chip in my head, is if it were typed for me while I was asleep.
So
How about this one?
go for it.
Living the past is a dull and lonely business. Looking back strains the neck muscles, causing you to bump into people not going your way.
That's great. I like that.
Isn't that a cool quote? Because how true it is when you try to explain anything from the past to people who are not into history at all. They just look at you like you have lobsters growing out of your ears. I mean, it just doesn't register somehow. And so that's one of the dangers of being a writer, too.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm chuckling because it's something I shared on Facebook not too long ago. Actually, not too long ago as when we recorded this, by historians learning from the failures of history are doomed, or no, those who fail to
Santa
read,
Ana. Yes.
fail to study the history are
No.
doomed to repeat it. Those who actually have studied it are doomed to stand by while everybody else repeats it. But anyway,
And finally,
please.
writing to be memorable must be done in a state of impassioned serenity. And that's a state that's pretty hard to get to, I find.
Yeah. Because
I don't know that it must be, because I manage without being impassionedly serene. What do you think?
I think you need to be drugged to be imaginably serene.
I don't
Yes,
think you.
It said something once like, if you're trying to write to be original, you're not going to be.
Yeah,
true.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. It's like, it'd be great if that's the result, but don't try to do that or you'll fail.
Yeah.
Yep.
Be
But it's-
natural and conscious about it.
Yeah.
I suppose it means being calm while being excited, which
Yeah.
is oxymoronic,
Thank
And
you.
yet, I suppose a lot of the things that writers do are pretty oxymoronic.
No, it's true. But on that, I'm going to say tune in next week for yet another interesting topic in the writing industry. Go out there, and even if you don't write epic, be epic. Tune in next week. Thank you for listening. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.
Writers, agents, and publishers. For the first time